I was the penultimate pharaoh of ancient Egypt's 18th dynasty. He held the throne of Egypt for a brief 4-year period in the late 14th century BC. Prior to his rule, he was a close advisor to 2, and perhaps 3, other pharaohs of the dynasty. It is speculated that he was the power behind the throne during child ruler Tutankhamun's reign. His praenomen Kepa means everlasting or the manifestations of Ra. Records his monuments that can be clearly attributed to El-Ra, both because his reign was short and because his successor, Horemheb, instigated a campaign of damnatio memoriae against him and the other pharaohs associated with the unpopular Mana period. Pharaoh, reign, 1323 to 1319 BC or 1327 to 1323 BC. Predecessor, Tutankhamun grandnephew and grandson-in-law. Successor, Horemhebensert, U uncertain, T Ankhesenamun granddaughter and grandniece-in-law. Children, Nakmen Nefertiti, Mutbinrit, Nejmet, died 1319 or 1323 BC. Burial WV23 Monuments Amarna Tomb Dynasty. 18th dynasty is believed to have been from Akhmim. During his short reign, he built a rock-cut chapel in Akhmim and dedicated it to the local deity Min. He may have been the son of the courtier Yuya and his wife Thuya, making him a brother of Tai and Anan. This connection is based on the fact that both Yuya and A came from Akhmim and held the titles God's father and master of horses. A strong physical resemblance has been noted between the mummy of Yuya and surviving statuary depictions of I. The mummy of A has not been located, although fragmentary skeletal remains recovered from his tomb may represent it, so a more thorough comparison with Yuya cannot be made. Therefore, the theory that he was the son of Yuya rests entirely on circumstantial evidence. A's great royal wife was Ti, who was known to be the wet nurse to Nefertiti. It is often theorized that he was the father of Nefertiti, as a way to explain his title God's father, as it has been argued that the term designates a man whose daughter married the king. However, nowhere are A and T referred to as the parents of Nefertiti. Nakmen, his chosen successor, was likely his son or grandson. Nakmen's mother was Iu, a priestess of Min and Isis in Akhmim. She may have been A's first wife. All that is known for certain was that by the time he was permitted to build a tomb for himself, Southern Tomb 25 at Amarna during the reign of Akhenaten, he had achieved the title of overseer of all the horses of His Majesty, the highest rank in the elite charioteering division of the army, which was just below the rank of general. Prior to this promotion he appears to have been first a troop commander, and then a regular overseer of horses, titles which were found on a box thought to have been part of the original furnishings for his tomb. Other titles listed in this tomb include fanbearer on the right side of the king, acting scribe of the king, beloved by him, and God's father. The fanbearer on the right side of the king was a very important position, and is viewed as showing that the bearer had the air of the ruler. The final God's father title is the one most associated with A, and was later incorporated into his royal name when he became pharaoh. This title could mean that he was the father-in-law of the pharaoh, suggesting that he was the son of Yuya and Thuya, thus being a brother or half-brother of Tai, brother-in-law to Amenhotep III and the maternal uncle of Akhenaten. Instead, the title may indicate that A was the tutor of Tutankhamun, if A was the son of Yuya, who was a senior military officer during the reign of Amenhotep III, then he likely followed in his father's footsteps, finally inheriting his father's military functions upon his death. Alternatively, it could also mean that he may have had a daughter that married the pharaoh Akhenaten, possibly being the father of Akhenaten's chief wife Nefertiti. Ultimately, there is no evidence to definitively prove either hypothesis. The two theories are not mutually exclusive, but either relationship would explain the exalted status to which it rose during Akhenaten's Amarna interlude, when the royal family turned their backs on Egypt's traditional gods and experimented, for a dozen years or so, with an early form of monotheism. An experiment that, whether out of conviction or convenience, appears to have followed under the reign of Akhenaten. The great hymn to the Aten is also found in his Amarna tomb, which was built during his service under Akhenaten. His wife T was born a commoner but was given the title nurse of the pharaoh's great wife. If she were the mother of Nefertiti, she would be expected to have the royal title mother of the pharaoh's great wife instead. Had he been the father of Nefertiti, then T would have been her stepmother. In several Amarna tomb chapels there is a woman whose name begins with Mut who had the title sister of the pharaoh's great wife. This could also be a daughter of Az by his wife T, and it is known that his successor Horemheb married a woman with the name Mutnajamet. Az's reign was preceded by that of Tutankhamun, who ascended to the throne at the age of 8 or 9, at a time of great tension between the new monotheism and the old polytheism. He was assisted in his kingly duties by his predecessors to closest advisors, Grand Vizier and General of the armies Horemheb. Tutankhamun's 9-year reign, largely under Az's direction, saw the return of the old gods and, with that, the restoration of the power of the Amen priesthood, who had lost their influence over Egypt under Akhenaten. Egyptologist Bob Breyer suggested that he murdered Tutankhamun in order to usurp the throne, claim which was based on X-ray examinations of the body done in 1968. He also alleged that Ankhesenamun and the Hittite prince she was about to marry were also murdered at his orders. This murder theory was not accepted by all scholars, and further analysis of the X-rays, along with CT scans taken in 2005, found no evidence to suggest that Tutankhamun died from a blow to the head as Breyer had theorized. In 2010, a team led by Zahi Hawass reported that the young king had died from a combination of a broken leg, malaria and collar disease, but another team from the Bernhard Nocht Institute for Tropical Medicine in Hamburg believes his death was caused by sickle cell disease. They buried his young predecessor, as depicted on the wall of Tutankhamun's burial chamber. The explicit depiction of a succeeding king conducting the opening of the mouth ceremony of another is unique. Other depictions are usually more generic. He was buried in the tomb intended for Tutankhamun in the West Valley of the King's W3, and Tutankhamun was interred in A's intended tomb in the East Valley of the King's KV62. Depending on the chronology followed, A served as pharaoh between 1323 and 1319 BC, 1327 to 1323 BC, or 1310 to 1306 BC. Tutankhamun's death around the age of 18 or 19, together with the fact he had no living children, left a power vacuum that his Grand Vizier A was quick to fill. He is depicted conducting the funerary rites for the deceased monarch and assuming the role of heir. The grounds on which he based his successful claim to power are not entirely clear. The commander of the army, Horemheb, had actually been designated as the IDNW, or Deputy of the Lord of the Two Lands under Tutankhamun, and was presumed to be the boy king's heir apparent and successor. It appears that Horemheb was outmaneuvered to the throne by An, who legitimized his claim to the throne by burying Tutankhamun, as well as possibly marrying Ankhesenamun, Tutankhamun's widow. Since A was already advanced in age upon his accession, he ruled Egypt in his own right for only 4 years. During this period, he consolidated the return to the old religious ways that he had initiated as senior advisor and constructed a mortuary temple at Medinet Harbor for his own use. Stela of Nakmenbel in 2074, a military officer under Tutankhamun, who was A's chosen successor, is dated to year 4. Pharaonic Day 1 of A's reign. Moneto's epitome assigns a reign length of 4 years and 1 month to Horemheb, and this was usually assigned to him based on this year for dated stela. However, it is now believed that figure should be raised by a decade to 14 years and 1 month and attributed to Horemheb instead, as Moneto intended. Hence, his precise reign length is unknown, and he could have ruled for as long as 7 to 9 years, since most of his monuments and his funerary temple at Medinet Habu were either destroyed or usurped by his successor, Horemheb. Spouse, which was presumably made during A's reign. Nakhtmin is clearly given the titles Crown Prince Jrjpt and King Sun Ensut. The only conclusion which can be drawn here is that Nakhtmin was either a son or an adopted son of A's, and that A was grooming Nakhtmin for the royal succession instead of Horemheb. The British Egyptologists Adon Dodson and Dye and Hilton observe that the aforementioned statue is broken after the signs for King Son of, and there has been considerable debate as to whether it continued to say Kush, making Nakhtmin a viceroy of Nubia, or of his body, making him an actual royal son. Since there is no other evidence for Nakhtmin as a viceroy with another man attested in office at this period, as well the latter suggestion seems the most likely. As Nakhtmin donated items to the burial of Tutankhamun without such a title, it follows that he only became a king's son subsequently, presumably under A. This theory is supported by the evidence of intentional damage to Nakhtmin's statue, since A was amongst the Amarna pharaohs whose memories were execrated under later rulers. It appears that one of Horemheb's undertakings as pharaoh was to eliminate all references to the monotheistic experiment, a process that included expunging the name of his immediate predecessors, especially A, from the historical record. Horemheb desecrated A's burial and had most of A's royal cartouche in his WV-3 tomb erased, while his sarcophagus was smashed into numerous fragments. However, the intact sarcophagus lid was discovered in 1970 by Otto Schaden. The lid had been buried under debris in this king's tomb and still preserved A's cartouche. Horemheb also usurped his mortuary temple at Medinet Habu for his own use. Yuval Hilcher (1878–1963), who excavated the temple in the early 1930s, provides these interesting details concerning the state of a Horemheb's mortuary temple. Wherever a cartouche has been preserved, the name of A has been erased and replaced by that of his successor Horemheb. In all but a single instance had it been overlooked and no change made. Thus the temple, which I had begun and finished, at least in the rear rooms with their fine paintings, was usurped by his successor and was thenceforth known as the Temple of Horemheb. Seals on stoppers of wine jars from the temple magazines read, "Wine from the Temple of Horemheb." Nozomu Kawai describes Horemheb's actions as a damnatio memoriae, since once he became king, Horemheb started erasing all depictions of A on the monuments of Tutankhamun, as well as those on A's royal monuments and those of his entourage. This action must be understood as damnatio memoriae. Horemheb desecrated A's tomb KV-23 in the western valley of the kings ... and removed all other inscriptions and images of A. The rivalry which began when A attempted to sideline Horemheb from the royal succession ended in Horemheb's victory.